Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are wading into waters that are, well, intensely personal, often taboo, yet absolutely fundamental to the structure of modern life. Sexual intimacy within marriage.
Mm.
We have a stack of clinical research, societal observations, and some really surprising biological facts that help unpack what happens when the spark dies and why, for a surprising number of people, it dies maybe faster than ever before.
It really is a subject shrouded in silence, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it often carries immense shame, which makes it just so difficult for couples to even bring up, let alone discuss openly.
Right.
Our sources establish immediately that this isn't just some private failure for a few unfortunate couples. It's actually a pervasive clinical issue.
Okay.
So our mission today is really to look beyond the usual suspect, scheduling conflicts, general tiredness, and try to understand the biological, societal, and psychological forces driving what's often called the sexless marriage.
And the opening line from the source material we looked at is pretty provocative. It kind of starts us off with a jolt, uses that sort of dark humor people sometimes use for uncomfortable truth.
Mm-hmm.
The quote is simple, cutting, and sadly, probably relatable for some. It's been said if you never want to have sex again, get married.
Yeah, that kind of nervous recognition that line gets, it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Does.
And we aren't here to judge, obviously, but to understand the reality behind that kind of, well, joke. The data actually confirms that for many, many people, sexual dissatisfaction is a major source of pain in their relationship.
A major source.
A major source. In fact, sexual intimacy is now identified as one of the most contentious issues couples face. It's apparently second only to conflict over finances.
Wow, second only to money.
That really establishes the incredibly high stakes for this deep dive, I think.
Absolutely. And a critical distinction our sources make right away is that we're not talking about couples who are, mutually content with a non-sexual arrangement.
No, that's different.
If you and your partner agree on that, fine. That's a non-issue, really. The clinical crisis, the problem we're exploring, starts when one partner deeply desires intimacy, connection, and sex, and the other person consistently refuses or avoids it.
Right. That disparity, that gap, causes corrosive relational damage. It really eats away at the foundation.
Yeah.
And we have a pretty stunning initial snapshot of just how widespread this dissatisfaction is, even among couples who say they're generally happy overall.
Okay.
Our sources cite a large national newspaper survey. It was primarily focused on married men, about 10,000 respondents in total. And the results were, well, they were bifurcated in a way that really reveals the core problem.
How so?
A solid 75% of those men reported being satisfied with their overall relationship. They loved their partner, the family, the life they'd built together.
That sounds pretty good. So what's the problem?
The problem is that over 50% reported being actively dissatisfied with their sex lives.
Over half, even though they were happy otherwise.
Exactly. Think about that gap for a moment. You could be fundamentally happy with your life partner, respect them, build a beautiful, successful life, and yet feel profoundly unhappy, unloved, and sexually disconnected.
That cognitive dissonance must be intense.
It is. And it's really the engine of this sexless marriage epidemic, as some call it.
That is a huge aha moment right there at the start. It suggests many couples might be making this unspoken trade-off, sacrificing erotic vitality for stability and companionship.
Seems that way sometimes.
So if this is so widespread, how do the experts actually define the term sexless marriage? Is there a specific threshold?
Yes, there is. Clinicians and researchers generally define a sexless marriage as one where the couple engages in sexual activity less than 10 times a year.
Less than 10 times a year.
And the data is staggering. Our sources confirm that around 20% of all marriages, that's 1 in 5, meet this definition.
1 in 5 couples.
1 in 5. So this isn't some niche problem affecting a few people. It's a societal phenomenon impacting millions, making it really crucial to understand the roots.
Okay, let's start unpacking this, maybe beginning with the underlying biology. Because often chemistry sets us up with an expectation that, well, maybe can't possibly last. We have to talk about the PEA factor.
Right. PEA stands for phenylethylamine. It's a naturally occurring stimulant and neuromodulator in the brain. You can think of it as the chemical equivalent of a firework display going off inside your head.
The love drug.
Pretty much. This is the chemical cocktail responsible for that intense rush of new romance, the elation, the excitement, the euphoria, sweaty palms, that head over heels attraction you feel when you first meet someone you're really sexually interested in. It makes passion feel absolutely effortless.
It's the stuff that makes people risk everything, maybe write bad poetry,
Mm-hmm.
completely neglect their responsibilities. The body is essentially just gorging itself on this incredible, happy drug cocktail, leading to that dizzying honeymoon period. But here's where biology throws the first major wrench into the idea of romantic love forever, right?
It absolutely does. Our sources explain that the human body simply cannot sustain that high level of PEA long term. The receptors, they eventually downregulate. It's just biology.
So it fades.
After about 2 years, this powerful chemical diminishes significantly. It's not like falling off a cliff, but it is a pretty dramatic fade.
And what typically happens right around that 2-year mark in relationships?
Well, that's often when couples either decide to, take the plunge and get married, or critically, it's when the first major, sometimes relationship-threatening conflicts start to surface.
Oh.
The chemical foundation for that effortless passion evaporates. And suddenly, sustaining intimacy requires conscious effort, vulnerability, and maybe most importantly, really robust communication.
Which might be lacking if you relied on the chemicals.
Exactly. If you haven't built that communication muscle during the PEA high, you're likely in trouble the moment those chemicals normalize.
So, just looking at the biology, we're kind of being set up for disappointment if we expect that initial spontaneous intensity to last for decades.
To some extent, yes.
But compounding that biological reality is this uniquely modern cultural dynamic that the source material calls the paradox of premarital sex.
Right. This is fascinating. Historically, this sequence was pretty clear. Marriage first, then you started your sex life. The marriage certificate was basically the starting gun.
But that's completely shifted.
Fundamentally shifted.
Mm.
Now, the average couple, according to the sources, is having sex for an average of 10 years before they ever get married.
Wait a minute. If the PEA fade happens around 2 years and the average couple is already sexually active for 10 years before marriage, that means they're already in a long-term, established post-PEA relationship before the rings are even exchanged.
Precisely. They are bringing a decade of sexual history and potentially, boredom or routine into a brand new institution.
So the sexual boredom might set in before they even get married?
That's the consequence, yes.
Yeah.
Potential sexual boredom or complacency can set in long before they even mess up the marital bed, as the source rather bluntly puts it.
Wow.
The sexual spark might have already dimmed because they've effectively been in the long-term phase for 8 years already.
Yeah.
So marriage isn't necessarily the cause of the decline. It's just the institution that formalizes a decline that was maybe already underway.
And this has real relational consequences right from day one of the marriage, doesn't it? It shows up in some pretty painful statistics.
It does.
We learn, for instance, that most brides today apparently do not have sex on their wedding nights, which seems shocking given the whole romantic buildup around weddings.
It speaks to the exhaustion, yes, but maybe also that existing habituation, that routine. And consider the emotional cost, which is maybe even more dramatic. 50% of the men surveyed in that study admitted they would not have married their spouse had they known the marriage would become sexless.
Half of them.
Half. That statistic isn't just about sex frequency. It speaks volumes about the severity of the connection gap It's seen as a fundamental deal breaker for half of those respondents, but it's realized only after the commitment is made.
That puts an immense amount of pressure on couples. And I think we all secretly wonder, even if we don't talk about it, what is the normal level of activity? We constantly measure ourselves against some invisible, probably idealized standard.
Everyone wants to know what's going on at the Joneses' house, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So what's the reality?
Well, the good news, perhaps, is that the Joneses are likely not sexual superhumans. Only about 7% of married couples are having truly frequent, sets the sheets ablaze kind of sex, the ones who might brag about it, or the ones we see portrayed in movies.
Okay, so that top tier is really the outlier, not the norm.
Definitely the outlier. The typical frequency for most couples, especially in the first decade of marriage, is slightly more than once a week. That equates to about 58 times a year.
Slightly more than once a week.
Yeah, and it's really crucial to normalize that baseline. When you realize the average is around once a week, and only about 1 in 5 couples dips below that 10 times a year mark, it helps manage expectations.
Right.
If you're striving for that 7% outlier status, you're probably setting yourself up for unnecessary frustration, especially since frequency does tend to decrease further after the first decade, just due to life pressures and everything else.
Okay, so if chemistry dictates the fade, then maybe cultural conditioning and early education dictate our capacity for future passion.
That's a big part of it, yes.
The source material argues that the next major factor contributing to this sexless marriage issue is a catastrophic failure of sex education. And it argues this failure is specifically and deeply gendered. Let's start with the fear-based education often directed at women.
This is where cultural conditioning actively suppresses desire, sometimes even eradicates it before it has a chance. Girls and young women are often systematically taught that sex is dirty or bad, or maybe at best, a necessary evil required for reproduction.
The focus isn't on pleasure.
Not at all. The entire focus in traditional sex ed, whether it's from schools or homes, is usually fear-based. We teach them how to avoid STIs and primarily how to avoid pregnancy. That's the main message.
And what's the consequence of framing it all so negatively?
Well, it fundamentally frightens women away from embracing or even tolerating sexual enjoyment. The discussion about female pleasure, about the importance of their own orgasm, is either entirely ignored or sometimes shamed away as unimportant or maybe selfish.
They internalize guilt.
A lifetime of guilt, often.
The source shares a really personal and illuminating anecdote about this shame, doesn't it? Recalling her experience as an Irish Catholic girl.
Yes, that recollection is incredibly powerful. Maureen's mother rushing in, horrified, simply asking if she had allowed a boy to French kiss her.
Just French kissing.
Just French kissing. And the accompanying overwhelming guilt she felt, even though she admitted she'd kissed a number of boys by then. It just illustrates how deep that shame is drilled in from a young age. That kind of education turns sexuality into something dangerous, something that must be contained or hidden away. So how can a woman suddenly be expected to turn off decades of internalized shame and embrace her sexuality fully just because she signs a marriage certificate?
It's a huge ask.
It's simply not realistic for many.
And this deep-seated conditioning, it leads directly to what the source calls the journey versus destination argument in the bedroom. This idea some women might voice, perhaps because of this conditioning or low expectations, that the journey is just as good as the destination, meaning, the kissing, the touching, the closeness is enough.
Right. And the expert really pushes back hard on this idea using that very effective analogy of the train ride.
Can you remind us of that?
Sure. Imagine you're excited. You're on a train with your lover, enjoying the build-up, the anticipation, the closeness, and you're heading toward what she calls the most pleasurable destination on the planet. Everything feels great. You're feeling aroused, anticipating the climax.
Okay.
But then, just before reaching that peak of pleasure, the partner abruptly gets off the train, leaving you still aroused, maybe incomplete or just feeling shut down.
That's a really brutal description of incomplete intimacy.
It is. And the source argues that claiming the journey is enough often masks a deeper reality, perhaps a lack of true pleasure, or more specifically, an avoidance of true fulfilling orgasm for the woman. It can become an excuse to stop short, maybe catering only to the partner's release while minimizing her own unsatisfied desire.
Okay, so that's the fear-based negative messaging often aimed at women. Now let's pivot to the quote-unquote sex education provided to boys and men today. It seems like the complete opposite in terms of accessibility, but maybe equally flawed in content.
Exactly. The source calls it a global program, free and accessible to basically everybody. And that is internet pornography.
Right.
It has become the dominant form of sexual instruction, intended or not, for a generation of boys and men. And while it's widely available, it is critically and fundamentally insufficient for real-world relationships.
How so? What's it missing?
Well, it does absolutely nothing to teach men or boys about genuine intimacy, about vulnerability or emotional connection, which, ironically, the source notes, remains deeply important to men, even if they can't always articulate it. Nor does it teach them how to make love in a real-world, intimate context where mutual satisfaction, not just performance, is the goal. It often sets completely unrealistic expectations for both their own performance and the visual availability or behavior of a partner.
So we end up with women conditioned to fear pleasure and men conditioned to expect instant performance-based, maybe emotionally stripped-down results.
It's a perfect, almost tragic formula for disconnect in the marital bedroom, isn't it?
It really is. And it leads directly to a crucial misconception about female arousal that clinical observation is trying hard to correct.
That's right. One of the most common complaints heard in marriage counseling, apparently, is that women never initiate sex.
Okay.
But when the therapist digs into why the women don't initiate, it almost always comes back to this deeply ingrained false belief.
Which is?
The belief that female sexual interest and desire must precede sexual activity. They mistakenly think they need to feel spontaneously aroused, like a light switch just flipping on before they start anything physical.
But that's not how it works for many women.
It's often the complete inverse of the clinical and biological reality, especially for women who are stressed, tired, juggling multiple roles. For many women, sexual activity, the initiating of touch, kissing, foreplay, is actually what prompts sexual interest and desire.
So the activity comes first sometimes.
Yes. Arousal emerges as a result of the activity, not necessarily as the required starting gun. So, if a woman waits for spontaneous desire to strike when she's exhausted, juggling 10 responsibilities, stressed about finances, well, she might wait forever.
That is such a vital piece of information. It implies that for many women, desire is often responsive, not spontaneous.
Exactly. Responsive desire.
So you're saying women need to almost give themselves permission to start the activity, even if they feel neutral, maybe trusting that the physical stimulation will bring the mental and emotional desire to the surface.
Exactly. It reframes the entire initiation process. It teaches couples that they often need to consciously create the circumstances for arousal, rather than just passively waiting for it to randomly appear out of thin air.
That seems like a massive step forward in overcoming the passivity that can characterize a cooling sex life.
It really can be, yeah.
Okay, so we've covered the chemical fade and the cultural damage from poor sex ed. Let's tackle the sheer, exhausting strain of modern life, which just piles pressure onto already fragile intimacy.
Right. The daily grind.
The source lists the factors that can turn holy matrimony to holy hell. It's the usual suspects, but maybe magnified today. Finances, the kids, the house, and the eternal struggle, illness.
Yes, the source humorously referenced the famous man cold.
Chuckle slightly.
Right. You promise in sickness and in health, but maybe that was before you witnessed the dramatic performance accompanying a seemingly minor ailment. It sounds trivial, but it highlights how even small irritations and perceived imbalances can become significant barriers when intimacy is already fragile.
But the truly severe strain, the pervasive exhaustion, that seems to fall disproportionately on women, doesn't it?
The sources confirm what a lot of societal research also shows. Most women today are working both inside and outside the home. It's that infamous double shift.
Or even triple shift.
Often, yeah. They're still doing the lion's share of the housework and domestic labor. Research mentioned suggests men may not be actively refusing, but they often report they don't feel they're good at it, which leads to this invisible emotional and physical burden on the woman to manage the household standard.
And then there's the caregiving aspect.
Exactly. Modern women are often the primary bridges connecting growing children to their schools, activities, social lives, while simultaneously managing the needs of aging parents, the sandwich generation.
That just creates a state of profound chronic exhaustion. And when you're operating in survival mode, running on fumes, your body's entire priority system shifts, right?
Absolutely. Reproduction and sexual desire, from a purely biological standpoint, are immediately deprioritized when the core system feels under threat from stress and fatigue. Survival comes first.
And even when couples are trying to connect amidst this exhaustion, they're often not truly present with each other.
That lack of presence is just hugely exacerbated by our newest relationship companion, the smartphone.
The phone in the bedroom.
The intrusion of technology into the most sacred space of the marriage, the bedroom, is, well, the numbers are staggering.
I found this number utterly shocking. 10% of people admit to checking their smartphones during sex.
During. Not before, not after. During the act itself.
It's mind-boggling.
And a massive 35% check them immediately afterward. We're constantly connected, aren't we? To the internet, to everyone except the person lying right next to us. We're chronically disconnected from our would-be lovers, as the source puts it,
All that energy leaking out towards the screen.
instead of inward toward the partner. Yeah.
This disconnection paints such a sad picture of intimacy today. The source even provides this darkly humorous but incredibly insightful description of the most common sex position for many married couples now.
Yes, that description of a modern, fatigued, doggy style,
How'd it go again?
where the man is on all fours begging and the woman plays dead. It's obviously not about the technical position. It's a powerful metaphor for the desire disparity, the exhaustion, and the emotional avoidance that plague so many bedrooms. It just speaks to a profound lack of mutual engagement.
And speaking of engagement, motherhood adds another complex, layered barrier. The source notes that the desire to have a baby can actually temporarily rev up a woman's sex drive. There's a biological push there.
A drive toward conception, yeah.
Yeah.
But once the baby arrives, the opposite is often true. Having the baby is quite likely to kill that desire, along with a lot of marital eroticism, for several crucial reasons.
Like what?
Well, first, the obvious physical demands.
Mm-hmm.
Sleepless nights, recovery, hormonal shifts, they're immense. But second, and maybe more critically, there's often this deep-seated cultural belief that motherhood and being sexual are somehow incongruous, mutually exclusive almost.
The Madonna horror complex idea.
Sort of, yeah. The identity shift from being a lover and partner to being primarily or even exclusively a caregiver can often overwhelm the erotic side of the relationship for a while, sometimes permanently if it's not addressed.
So when the problems run this deep beyond just exhaustion or scheduling conflicts, clinical practice has to dig into the hidden barriers, right? This is where the source highlights a second crucial clinical question asked of every patient seeking help for sexual issues.
Moving past the surface stuff.
That's right. And that question is, have you ever experienced sexual abuse or unwanted sexual advances as a child?
Getting right to potential trauma.
Exactly. This gets to the trauma that may be unconsciously sabotaging intimacy years or even decades later. This is often the deepest, darkest secret underlying a sexless marriage.
Let's talk about the first case example mentioned, John. Yeah. His story illustrates this hidden trauma perfectly, doesn't it?
It really does. He was married for 7 years, desperately wanted children, yet the marriage had never been consummated. Never.
Of an year.
7 years. They'd gone through years of familial and societal pressure, judgment, confusion, and he just couldn't understand why his wife was so physically resistant to him.
And the reason? It was only in the safe space of the clinical setting that John's wife finally revealed the truth, a truth she had buried since childhood.
Oh.
She had been sexually abused at age 6 by a friend's father.
Oh, awful.
That trauma had convinced her, on a deep subconscious level, that sex was dirty, physically painful, and fundamentally unsafe. Her physical resistance in the marriage wasn't about John at all. It was a subconscious defense mechanism rooted in that childhood violation.
So the marriage was sexless, not because she didn't love him.
No, but because she carried this unbearable, secret wound about sex itself.
The profound takeaway here is just, you can't heal what you don't acknowledge, can you?
Absolutely not. And it powerfully underscores why our sources stress the urgent need for a worldwide moratorium on ending sexual violence, because the resulting emotional and relational damage lasts a lifetime, often manifesting right in the most intimate parts of adult life.
Then there's the second case example, which illustrates how internal identity conflicts can also manifest as a sexless marriage, even without a history of abuse. This is the story of George.
A very tragic story. George, a 40-year-old man, married a beautiful and accomplished woman. By all outside appearances, a great match.
But the relationship was immediately cold and sexless, confusing everyone around them. What was the hidden barrier in George's case?
George was gay. He felt immense pressure to maintain a traditional facade for his deeply conservative family. He was terrified of the shame and social exclusion that he believed coming out would bring.
So what was his plan?
His terrible and ultimately devastating plan was to go through with the marriage, essentially live a lie, wait until his parents passed away, and then divorce his wife and finally marry the man he truly loved.
So he used the sexless marriage basically as a holding pattern, a closet he could hide in until he felt safe enough to live his truth?
Essentially, yes. He knew immediately that the marriage would be sexless because his attraction, his authentic self, was elsewhere. It confirms that his sexuality was the deepest, most hidden barrier to intimacy with his wife.
Both John's and George's cases really prove that powerful maxim, don't they? Sex is truly the barometer of the state of affairs in a marriage.
It absolutely is. It reflects not just the surface relational issues, but often our deepest traumas and our most hidden identities.
Okay, let's pivot now to physical health, because the state of your sexual function often gives really strong early signals about the state of your general health. We're talking specifically about erectile dysfunction, ED, as a crucial warning sign that extends far beyond the bedroom.
Right. And the source material uses a brilliant, really memorable analogy here. It likens the penis to an airplane.
Okay.
If the pilot, the man, can't get the plane up and keep it up for the entire trip, the immediate problem isn't necessarily the pilot himself. It's often the engine.
And the engine in the body is?
The engine is the heart, and the fuel lines are the vascular system, the blood vessels.
So ED is the classic canary in the coal mine. It's not just a sexual inconvenience. It might be the first, earliest detectable sign of serious underlying systemic health problems.
Absolutely. It's a critical warning sign. Because the blood vessels supplying the penis are among the smallest and most sensitive in the body, they often show signs of plaque buildup and blockage much earlier than the larger vessels leading to the heart or the brain.
So it's an early indicator.
A very early indicator. So if a man is experiencing persistent ED, it may signify underlying cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, or perhaps dangerously low testosterone levels. The sexual dysfunction is literally a warning alarm for potential imminent physical danger down the road.
And it's not just purely physical ailments, right? Stress and lifestyle factors feed directly into this, compounding the problem.
Oh, definitely. Chronic stress, substance use and abuse, excessive alcohol consumption, unresolved conflict in the relationship, major financial worries, all of these contribute heavily to low desire in ED in both men and women, but particularly ED in men.
How does stress do that?
When the body is in a state of high alarm due to stress, whether it's emotional, physical, financial, it basically shuts down non-essential functions. And from a survival perspective, libido and erection are considered non-essential when basic survival feels threatened.
Survival takes priority.
Always.
The source provides a sort of humorous yet deeply reflective perspective on how pervasive this problem is becoming when discussing the 84-year-old widow, Ella, who wanted to start dating again.
Right, Ella. She was vibrant, active, ready for companionship, but she was apparently frustrated that the old guys couldn't get it up anymore.
Which sounds like an issue maybe exclusive to the elderly.
You'd think so, but the source makes the rather grim point that this problem is migrating younger and younger. Men in their 30s and 40s may already be experiencing ED due to poor diet, chronic stress, lack of exercise, sedentary lifestyles.
Wow, 30s and 40s.
Yeah, the joke that Ella might have to aim for a millennial to find someone functional highlights just how widespread and maybe prematurely this problem is occurring today.
Okay, now let's transition to the emotional cost. Beyond the physical issues and the frustration, what are the reported feelings of people who feel trapped in sexless marriages?
Well, they consistently report feeling deeply frustrated, certainly, unloved, undesirable, unattractive. But the single worst feeling reported, the one that seems to cause the most profound damage, is intense loneliness.
Loneliness within the marriage.
Exactly. You can be in the same house, share the same bed with the same person for decades, and feel completely, utterly isolated.
And our sources really validate the seriousness of this emotional state by connecting it directly to physical health outcomes. Loneliness isn't just sad, it's actually dangerous.
It's truly life-threatening. It's more than just sadness.
Yeah.
Chronic loneliness puts the body into a state of constant low-grade stress. This stress increases vascular resistance, it elevates blood pressure over time, and it accelerates systemic inflammation throughout the body, all of which can lead to an early death.
That's incredible.
The research is chilling, actually. People are statistically more likely to die from loneliness, from the physiological impact of chronic isolation, than they are from obesity or even excessive alcohol consumption.
Wow. That just validates how fundamental emotional and physical intimacy are to our overall survival and longevity.
Absolutely essential.
So, given that immense emotional and physical cost, it's perhaps understandable, though not ideal, that some couples seek relief elsewhere, which leads us to infidelity.
Right.
The expert makes a pretty controversial but clinically grounded observation here. If women are not having sex with their husbands, well, someone else may be.
Yeah. And the expert frames this observation very carefully as a kind of community service warning, not as blame.
Not blaming the woman.
No, not at all. It's about recognizing the vacuum that gets created by a chronically sexless environment. When core human needs for connection, validation, and intimacy are consistently unmet within the primary relationship, human nature often dictates seeking resolution elsewhere.
But the motivations for infidelity in a sexless marriage, they differ dramatically by gender, according to the source. That's a critical distinction.
A very critical distinction. Generally speaking, men in sexless marriages often cheat, primarily to remain in that marriage.
To stay? That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, but the thinking is often that the infidelity satisfies their physical needs, and perhaps some emotional needs, just enough to alleviate the pressure and frustration at home. It allows them to maintain the financial stability, the family structure, the public image they rely on. They usually want the sex life at home to improve, but the affair isn't typically about breaking up the marriage itself.
Okay. And women?
Women, conversely, are often cheating specifically to leave a sexless marriage.
As an exit strategy.
Exactly. They're often seeking the emotional validation and the physical fulfillment they feel they need to solidify their decision to depart. The affair becomes their emotional life raft, their bridge out of the marriage. And the source notes, women are typically sneakier about it, apparently, and tend not to get caught as often.
Interesting observation. And technology naturally plays a huge role here.
Oh, massively.
Hmm.
It streamlined and accelerated the whole process. Technology makes cheating incredibly accessible for everyone, from, high-profile politicians to stay-at-home parents. It's just a few clicks away.
Texting to sexting.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The quick text can escalate rapidly to sexting, and the sources confirm there's a direct correlation. The more two people communicate intimately online, the higher the likelihood of an eventual in-person encounter becomes. It lowers the barriers significantly.
And if you want to blame something beyond technology or your partner, you can always point fingers at your DNA, apparently. The source touches on a genetic component related to risk-taking and infidelity.
Yeah, it mentions the DRD4 gene. This gene has been isolated in some studies of individuals identified as cheaters. It's associated with the brain's dopamine system, the pleasure and reward pathway.
So it makes people seek novelty.
Potentially, yes. It might make those who carry certain variants more susceptible to novelty-seeking behavior, thrill-seeking. And a sexless marriage provides this perfect, high-stakes, but low-reward environment at home, which, in turn, could act as the perfect trigger to turn on that gene, so to speak, and compel someone to reactivate that powerful PEA love drug rush, but outside the marital structure.
Seeking the intensity they're missing.
And seeking that chemical high, essentially. It adds another layer of complexity to understand the behavior.
Okay, while a lot of the data on decline and dissatisfaction is pretty sobering, the source material is actually fundamentally optimistic, isn't it? About the capacity for couples to recover intimacy and sustain a healthy sex life well into old age.
Yes, absolutely. There's definitely hope.
First, we have to just debunk these popular myths about when sex ends. It's kind of shocking how young people think it stops.
It is astounding. The source mentioned a 44-year-old asking if sex ends at 65, and even a 22-year-old thinking it was all over by 35.
35.
Yeah. The expert's message here is really firm and essential. Sex never has to end. If you prioritize your health, both cardiovascular and mental, you can absolutely have a great, fulfilling sex life well into your 80s and even 90s.
That's encouraging.
Sex is inherently healthy. It's good for you physically and emotionally. We just need to strip away all the cultural shame and negativity that surrounds it, especially as we age.
Okay, so if a couple recognizes these factors, the biology, the culture, the stress, and they commit to actually revving up the marriage, what are the specific actionable recommendations that come from the clinical and biological context? What can people actually do?
Well, the first one is a non-negotiable physical requirement. It starts with movement.
Exercise.
Daily workouts, or at least regular exercise, are essential because sex is fundamentally about blood flow. And good blood flow requires good circulation and heart health.
That's why lifestyle changes are often the first line for ED.
Exactly. Exercise increases agility, stamina, both obviously useful, and crucially for women, increased blood flow to the genitalia directly increases sexual sensation and response. So you are literally required to keep your vascular system healthy if you want a healthy sex life long term.
Makes sense. Okay, recommendation 2. Deal with the mechanics. Don't let functional physical issues become these permanent passive barriers.
Right. Get help for any actual sexual dysfunction. Don't just ignore it and hope it goes away. For women, for example, vaginal dryness is incredibly common, but also very manageable.
What causes that typically?
It can often be caused by the oral contraceptive pill, by breastfeeding, or naturally during perimenopause or postmenopause due to hormonal changes. Ignoring it makes sex physically uncomfortable, maybe even painful, and that becomes a very rapid reason to avoid intimacy entirely.
But there are treatments.
Simple, safe treatments are available: lubricants, moisturizers, sometimes hormonal options.
Oh.
Acknowledging the issue and talking to a doctor is the first essential step.
Okay. Then there's the necessary technological intervention, demanding a shift in our attention and focus.
Yes. Prioritize your spouse over your device. Plain and simple. The quote here from the source is brilliantly harsh but true. Spend more time in your bedrooms than you do in your boardrooms, or your bedrooms are going to become boardrooms.
Meaning cold and transactional.
Exactly. If you dedicate all your best mental energy, your focus, your presence to your smartphone or your work emails right up until bedtime, there will be nothing left for your actual relationship. You have to consciously choose to pay more attention to your partner than to that pocket computer in your hand.
And we can't ignore the relational core, right? You have to address the foundational conflicts that are creating the distance in the first place.
Absolutely. Deal with the marital issues head on. The physical space often mirrors the relational space, so maintain basic intimacy habits, even small ones. Go to sleep in the same bed at the same time whenever possible.
Why is that simple thing so important?
It seems minor, but that routine forces a certain level of relational proximity. It prevents the deepening of emotional isolation that can happen when couples start sleeping separately or going to bed hours apart. Conflict avoidance only deepens sexual avoidance. You have to talk.
The source also provides some fascinating advice on the mental game, emphasizing the role of fantasy.
Right. The brain is your largest sex organ after all, and fantasy is key to maintaining arousal and interest, especially in long-term relationships.
What's the advice there?
The expert strongly encourages listeners not to believe they have to have sex with the exact same person in their mind for the rest of their life. That's an unnecessary pressure.
So fantasizing is okay.
More than okay, it's healthy. Fantasy allows for mental exploration, novelty, excitement, and it keeps the mental engine running without impacting the physical fidelity of the relationship. It's a necessary outlet for novelty for many people.
And finally, a bit of advice on what to bring into the marriage and what not to.
Right. Don't bring anyone else into your marriage bed except perhaps for a great sex toy and a good sex therapist.
External aids and professional help are good.
Yes. External aids like toys and professional, objective help like therapy are encouraged. Outside romantic partners are obviously not. A sex therapist can provide that non-judgmental, objective space needed to uncover those hidden traumas, misconceptions, communication blocks we discussed earlier. And external tools can certainly help in stimulating responsive desire and breaking patterns of monotony.
It seems vital to place this whole modern struggle in a bit of historical context to understand the immense burden we actually place on marriage today.
That's a really important point. Historically, marriage was primarily transactional, wasn't it?
Yeah, practical.
It was about acquiring property, securing advantageous in-laws, maybe ensuring enough hands for physical labor on the farm. It was fundamentally a practical social economic contract.
But then things changed.
Hugely. With the rise of egalitarian ideals, mass media, Hollywood movies in the 20th century, marriage was suddenly burdened with this enormous expectation. The promise of eternal, exclusive, passionate, romantic love forever.
The Hollywood end.
The Hollywood ending, exactly. And that burden is now massively prolonged because modern science allows people to live much longer, often into their 80s and 90s. So that challenge of sustaining intense, romantic, sexual love, which is one person over maybe 6 or 7 decades.
It's a huge ask.
It's immense. That cultural expectation, often built upon the fleeting foundation of that 2-year PEA high, is just enormous. Hashtag shag outro. So we've really conducted quite a comprehensive deep dive today into this phenomenon of the sexless marriage, haven't we? We've covered the biological inevitability, like the PEA chemical fade, the damage done by cultural conditioning, like that fear-based sex education, and the powerful modern stressors, chronic exhaustion, technological distraction, and the truly silent, deadly costs of loneliness.
Right. And this analysis hopefully provides you, the listener, with the critical why behind the problem. Understanding that addressing sexual health isn't just about having more fun, although that's part of it. It's fundamentally about addressing your cardiovascular health, your mental health, and the overall longevity of your relationship and potentially your life. The cost of doing nothing, of letting the disconnection fester, can be severe, maybe even shortening your lifespan through chronic stress and isolation.
And hopefully this deep dive gives you permission to talk about this topic, maybe with your partner, maybe with a doctor or therapist. Permission to seek help for those physical barriers like ED or vaginal dryness, and permission to challenge the cultural shame that still surrounds sexuality. And remember that key insight for women. Arousal often follows action, so the willingness to initiate, even when not feeling spontaneous desire, can be absolutely key.
And we want to leave you with the expert's final, really provocative closing thought from the source material. A truly challenging piece of advice designed to cut through relational avoidance and maybe spark a raw conversation tonight if needed. Her recommendation to end the cycle of conflict and disconnection is this: settle all marital arguments in the bedroom naked.
Wow, that's direct.
It is. Think about what that practice would actually reveal about the true nature of conflict and intimacy in your own relationship. Would the fight just melt away because the sheer vulnerability forces reconnection? Or would the inability to connect physically, even then, expose a much deeper, more unresolved issue that needs immediate professional attention?
It's the ultimate test, isn't it?
Mm.
Of whether your conflict is really about the issue at hand or if it's just become a proxy for lost intimacy and connection.
A challenging, definitely honest and vulnerable thought to end on, but one that certainly gets right to the core of the issue we've been discussing. Thank you for diving deep with us.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.